This message comes from Charles Schwab. When it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it. You can also invest on your own and trade on Thinkorswim. Visit schwab.com to learn more.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Is veganism losing its luster?
Being a vegan or becoming a vegan or going vegan was an aspiration for people for a long time, but it's hard. And every vegan, well, almost every vegan will tell you that it's hard.
There's this sort of nihilistic strain of like, everything sucks, this sort of party at the end of the world vibe. And there's certainly been trend pieces looking at tanning beds are back. Smoking has social cachet again. There have been some articles about fur being back on runways. This kind of sense of like, I'm going to enjoy what I have left, I think sort of like cheekily depressing. And, you know, that's bad. Like, I think veganism, I think it requires optimism.
Vegan or not, what you're eating says a lot about your values and your politics. And it seems like that's shaping the restaurant business. Or is it? I know, you might have been expecting to hear Brittany. She's out today, so I'm stepping in. A few things to know about me. My name is Danielle Kurtzleben. I'm a White House correspondent at NPR, and I eat meat. In fact, I grew up on a pig farm in Iowa. It wasn't until I got to college that I met my first vegan. As you probably already know, someone who follows a vegan diet doesn't consume any food derived from animals or animal products. So no meat, seafood, dairy, eggs. Some vegans don't eat honey either. But even as I met more and more vegans, it felt like a niche subculture to me. Until the 2010s, when it felt like suddenly everyone and everything was becoming plant-based. From Beyoncé.
In today's health report, what Beyoncé eats. The celebrity was on Good Morning America today to talk about her new vegan diet.
To, well, meat itself, as plant-based meat alternatives started to hit the market.
Beyond Meat expected to report results after the bell today. The stock has been soaring.
Beyond Meat shares have been on a tear, up a whopping 840% since it went public, making it the best performing IPO this year.
Veganism wasn't just becoming a shorthand for taking care of your health and the planet. It seemed like a future people wanted to financially invest in. At its height in 2020, the U.S. plant-based protein retail market made $1.54 billion in sales. But every boom has its bust.
I think the first thing that I started to notice was that vegan restaurants in New York, where I live, seemed to be closing at a rate that was notable. And the number of openings was not replacing them.
That's Rachel Sugar. She writes about food and culture and recently wrote a piece for New York Magazine about the boom and bust of vegan restaurants and plant-based industries in general.
And I also talked to people in the restaurant industry and started to see these menus that were, very, very meaty. There were all these steakhouses that seemed to be opening and this kind of throwback to a very velvet, decadent, bloody aesthetic.
She writes that between 2012 and 2020, the number of self-proclaimed animal-free food and drink products launched in the U.S. catapulted by 282%. But now, alternative meat brands like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat are losing money, and meat sales are at a record high.
Some people become vegans because they see it as a principled act, and that's admirable and understandable, but that's not the same as becoming a vegan because it's cool or because you think it's going to change your life.
That's Mark Bittman, longtime food journalist and former New York Times columnist who has written about veganism since the early 2010s.
I just want to remind everyone that spaghetti with tomato sauce is vegan, as are like a billion other quote-unquote normal dishes, and that we all eat vegan some of the time. The question is, how much more unmeat do we get, not how pure we can be.
I'm getting into it with Rachel.
Hi.
And Mark.
Hi, Danielle.
To get a better sense of why vegan business is on the decline and what that says about us. You're listening to It's Been a Minute, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. I'm Danielle Kurtzleben in for Brittany Luce. So, Rachel, you saw this decrease in vegan businesses in New York. What do the actual numbers look like among people identifying as vegan?
That's sort of a constant tricky thing. The numbers are small and they fluctuate for the last 30 years. You're sort of hovering between 1%, 3%, and the boom in interest and enthusiasm and options did not seem to lead to a boom in people, at least on survey data, people identifying as vegan.
Curious about your thoughts, Mark. Have you been following this sort of boom and bust, I guess, of how the culture sees veganism or how businesses are operating around veganism?
I don't see it as boom or bust. Rachel covered this stuff beautifully, but something that is causing a lot of noise to be made doesn't mean that people are changing their behavior. And I think that's probably universal, but it's especially true in the United States, where we've always, jumped on bandwagons for 10 minutes and then jumped off again. And going vegan was an aspiration for people for a long time, but it's hard. And almost every vegan will tell you that it's hard. Americans set themselves up for failure by becoming Puritans. Not everyone, obviously, and then it's like, oh, well, that didn't work. I'll go back to eating in a bro restaurant on Broad Street that's like velvet, as Rachel said. It's like the culture doesn't have to be all meat all the time or vegan. It needs to be on the spectrum, and the spectrum needs to move towards the plant-based end of things. But seeing things in black and white is just sort of how we often do things, and it's lunacy.
Yeah, and when you say needs to, you mean needs to because of sustainability? Studies show vegan diets cause 75% less in greenhouse emissions, water pollution, and land use than meat-rich diets do.
I mean, health also, but sustainability for sure.
Right, and of course, there are real health benefits to veganism and going plant-based in general, like healthier gut biomes, stronger immune systems, lower rates of cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. I'm wondering how a broader interest in veganism changed over time.
My understanding is pre-2010s, a lot of vegans, maybe most, it was an ethical stance. And it was about the environment, or it was about animal welfare. It was about sort of not prioritizing humans over other animals. It was about this sort of kindness and compassion. And then you sort of get this rise of, actually, it's good for you. Actually, it makes you, hot and thin. It's this beautiful, aspirational celebrity California thing. And you start to sort of get, quote unquote, health vegans. And that's oversimplified. And because there are real health benefits, and you see different populations and sort of different demographics get really into veganism for health reasons that are not about being sort of thin and beautiful, but are about sort of reclaiming health from food deserts and systems of oppression. But I think sort of the dominant cultural narrative was being vegan is good for you, and it's something rich celebrities do, and you're going to feel so great, and you're going to eat your bowl of whatever, your salad, smoothie, something in a bowl, and it's going to feel really good. And I think that gets tricky because the way that trends work is that they change from plant-based to, actually the recommendations are wrong. We need to be eating so much protein. We need just unfathomable amounts of protein. We should be blending chicken breasts into smoothies to just keep that protein up.
Right. And to clarify, you're talking about a more extreme end of this protein maxing trend.
Right. And we move away from a lot of cardio. The sort of fitness trends changed. Now everybody's lifting heavy, which does necessitate sort of more protein. And so I think as health trends change, people who sort of entered eating a vegan diet because it was a health trend move on to other health trends, and the health trend has shifted.
Well, this is a thing I wanted to ask you guys about. You're talking about trends, and I think about, when I was young, everything was non-fat. Then Atkins was big. Then there's keto and there's paleo. Now everybody's avoiding highly processed foods. But veganism doesn't seem like it's quite one of those things. Those are highly branded, in many cases, diets. So how does veganism compare to those sorts of trendy diets that pop up?
I mean, Veganism isn't nonsense. Plant-based eating isn't nonsense. Plant-based eating is smart and the way of the future. Full-time veganism is challenging and not necessarily something to aspire to. There's nothing wrong with aspiring to it, but if you then fail at achieving it, you have to watch out for the backlash.
There's certainly some heavy baggage associated with vegans, and there always has been. The jokes about, how do you know you're talking to a vegan? Don't worry, they'll tell you, that sort of thing. That vegans are pious or strict or moralistic. Is that baggage still present?
I think that baggage is still present. I don't think it's related to real life behavior of vegans, and I don't know if it ever really was. But I mean, certainly this idea that you're going to be a vintage PETA activist and, throw red paint on your animal eating enemies or something, which I don't think is PETA's current strategy and I don't think is really happening. But yeah, I think that baggage is still present. And I think about this conversation I had with my mother a lot when I first met my husband, who was vegan. And she was like, yeah, but he doesn't think everybody should be vegan, right? I was like, well, I mean, yeah, he kind of does, though. He's not obnoxious about it, but of course he thinks that, or he wouldn't do it. My hunch is that even if the vegans that you're with are super accommodating and don't say it, do they think it's great that you're eating, a steak? No. And I think that's kind of an intractable problem.
Coming up.
If everybody ate fewer animals, obviously we'd kill fewer of them, and we'd slow climate change, and we'd slow environmental degradation, and we'd make ourselves healthier, not coincidentally. So it's very rare to find something that's good for you and for everybody else and the planet at the same time, but eating less meat is one of those things.
After a quick break.
This message comes from MIDI Health, a virtual care platform for women in perimenopause and menopause. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kathleen Jordan shares the wide range of symptoms they work to address for women in midlife.
There's dry eyes, dry hair, dry skin, there's dry mouth, trouble sleeping, panic and anxiety attacks. When we ask patients about common symptoms, on average, they report 6.
MIDI Health, committed to helping women in midlife with perimenopause and menopause care, accessible via telehealth visits at joinmidi.com.
This message comes from NPR sponsor 1Password. Anyone else feel like 99% of your emails and texts are password reset codes? Trusted by millions of users and over 175,000 businesses, 1Password lets you skip the resets and sign in securely with strong, unique passwords that autofill across all your devices. You can safely share logins, store cards and files, and finally stop using your pet's name as a password. Try it free for 2 weeks at onepassword.com/NPR.
This message comes from BetterHelp. February is full of flowers, candy, and lots of relationship talk. It can feel like everyone has it all together in their love lives, but the truth is, they're still figuring it out. And whether you're married, dating, or prioritizing being single, just remember, you're right on time. Therapy can take the pressure off and help you feel lighter. Just a little outside perspective from a professional can lead to new understanding and a lot of progress. Visit betterhelp.com/NPR for 10% off.
If I'm being super stereotypy, there's a political divide in how people eat. And I tend to think, I think a lot of people do, that veganism is more of a lefty thing, and that filling up on steak and whole milk is maybe more of a right-wing maha thing. Is that a fair summary? I mean, is it more left-leaning people who are gravitating towards veganism these days?
I think you can say you're vegan and that doesn't say anything about what you think about, vaccine policy. But I do think it's left-ish coded in the U.S. And my sense is that is not new. Yeah. I think in terms of the very far sort of carnivore, I eat only steak and sticks of butter, does have a right codedness. But I think this sort of protein mania does really cut across political beliefs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've talked about here how veganism is, how you might eat. But for some people, it's a political choice. It's an ethical choice. For some people, it's a whole identity. So whatever cultural shifts there have been around veganism, or as it's called sometimes, plant-based eating in the U.S., how has what it means to be a vegan shifted? And maybe let's start with you, Rachel, about the more immediate recent history. And Mark, I'm curious what you have to say about the longer view.
I think there are a lot of vegans who would very much say it is not a diet, but it is a sort of all-encompassing sort of life-guiding approach. I'm interested in the diet part of it primarily because that feels incredibly immediate and concrete and inclusive in terms of everybody eats, so what are they eating? So that's sort of my interest. As sort of a major understatement, the vibes right now are bad, generally. and I think
you mean around veganism or just in general?
In the world.
Okay.
And I think that matters. There's this strain, at least among younger-ish people, there's this sort of nihilistic strain of everything sucks, this sort of party at the end of the world vibe. And there's certainly been trend pieces sort of looking at tanning beds are back, smoking has social cachet again. There have been some articles about fur being back on runways. This kind of sense of I'm going to enjoy what I have left, cheekily depressing. And so in that sense, I think, that's bad. I think veganism is sort of, I think it requires optimism. I think it requires my tiny individual choice, which obviously doesn't change a whole lot. What I eat, I'm one person, but this is what I'm going to choose to eat. This is how I'm going to try to spend my money. This is what I'm going to try to support. That's an optimistic thing to do. And I think that kind of optimism is sort of cringe and of a time that isn't this moment. And I think this moment is not a conducive one to sort of asking people to make little choices for, plotting incremental change. But I hope that changes. And I think sort of looking at a long view, it will by necessity or otherwise.
Mm-hmm. I love that answer.
Well, same answer. I mean, we kill something like 10 billion animals a year in this country. If everybody ate fewer animals, obviously we'd kill fewer of them, and we'd slow climate change, and we'd slow environmental degradation, and we'd make ourselves healthier, not coincidentally. So it's very rare to find something that's good for you and for everybody else and the planet at the same time, but eating less meat is one of those things.
Mark Bittman and Rachel Sugar, thank you so much for talking with me today. This has been a delight.
It was fun.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah.
That was Mark Bittman. He's a longtime New York Times columnist and cookbook author. And Rachel Sugar, a food writer whose story, How Veganism Got Cooked, you can read in New York Magazine. And I'm Danielle Kurtzleben, a White House correspondent for NPR. You can come hang out with me on the NPR Politics podcast and read my political analysis at npr.org. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by Alexis Williams and Skylar Swenson. It was edited by Nina Patek. Our supervising producer is Barton Girdwood. Our VP of programming is Yolanda Sangweni. All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Danielle Kurtzleben in for Brittany Luce, and thank you for listening.
This message comes from Capella University. That spark you feel? That's your drive for more. Capella University's FlexPath learning format lets you earn your degree at your pace without putting life on pause. Learn more at capella.edu.
This message comes from NPR sponsor NetSuite. Every business is asking the same question. How did they make AI work for them? With NetSuite by Oracle, you can put AI to work today. NetSuite is the #1 AI cloud ERP, trusted by over 43,000 businesses. It's the unified suite that brings your financials, inventory, commerce, HR, and CRM together. If your revenues are at least in the seven figures, get the free business guide, Demystifying AI, at netsuite.com/story.
This message comes from Intuit TurboTax. With TurboTax Expert Full Service, match with a dedicated expert who will do your taxes for you from start to finish, getting you every dollar you deserve. It's that easy. Visit TurboTax.com to match with an expert today.